Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. In this video, my neighbor repeatedly drove through my private land to access my lake. Of course, without my permission. Here is what happened. And the first one starts like this. Memorial Day 2022, a not so great start to my summer. So I own a big piece of property in Minnesota. It also comes with a lake. My neighbors are a bunch of a-holes. You may ask, why? Well, for starters, they terrorize my property every chance they get. They sneak in and use my lake, go fishing, swimming and diving in it after I told them not to. They even hold tailgating parties and shoot off fireworks. Afterwards, they trash it and leave me with the cleanup. You might think that I'm making this up, but it is true. My neighbors are a bunch of petty a-holes. I bought my property 3 years ago and apparently all my neighbors want a piece of it. Only they don't want the land itself, they just want to use it thinking it is their own. The first time my neighbors trespassed on my land and went swimming in my lake, I was immensely annoyed. I was standing outside my house and I heard from across the lake a giant rumbling noise. It turns out that my neighbor had an RV and wanted to camp on my lake for the weekend. This was Memorial Day back in 2022. I go up to them and pull up in my pickup truck and ask what the hell they are doing. I figure if I were nice about it, they would leave. But they didn't. They instead proceeded to make a campfire and go fishing right on my lake. Their 10-year-old son and his friends were there and were causing a scene, whining and crying because they didn't catch any fish and shooting off their little BB guns at each other. I told the neighbor to get off the property again after they wouldn't leave for a few hours. I told them, "You cannot camp here, this is my property." I even threatened to call the police, but they figured it was just a one-time thing. This was before they started using it more and making it their own. That night, I went back inside and looked through my binoculars to find them still camping and trespassing all over my property around the lake. They were making a bunch of racket and being very rude. This was around 10 p.m. I ended up falling asleep that night on my couch. I woke up the next morning and they were still there. I pull up again and told them to leave right away. They just stared at me. This time though, the husband got really ticked off and started saying that they had a right to enter my lake and do whatever they want because of some easement or previously bargained rights to the lake or some BS like that. The last time I checked though was that an easement is either two things. Number one, easement appurtenant. This basically means that if a previous owner dies or sells the home, the easement goes along with the property. Number two, easement grows. This means that the easement to use the property changes when the ownership changes. In this case, I owned the property with an easement in grows. Or in other words, those sorry sick Fs have no access to my property. When they trespassed and continued to not budge Memorial Day, I ended up going to my lawyer. He explained it all. He told me that the previous owners had an easement in grows, but since they passed away recently, it was nullified. The neighbors thought they could continue to use the lake, thinking that they were entitled to it. That morning when I went out to talk with them, the husband got really mad. He started shaking his fist at me and I thought he was gonna pull out a gun or something. I told them, if you're not off my property in the next hour, I'm calling the police. They then finally left, but just a couple of weeks ago, they came back. Before that though, I placed no trespassing and no lake access signs all over the lake and near the entrance to it. I guess the neighbors thought they could come in and use it and Memorial Day is for lake days or something because previously I did not see them come in and use it. Maybe they did and I just did not see it anyway. They ended up coming back a second time. This time it is on the 4th of July. They end up shooting fireworks too. At this point, I had a small dock built on the lake and they ended up jumping off of it and creating a slip and slide so they could jump into the lake. I was furious, let alone I didn't want a lawsuit if something happened to them. I go outside and start yelling at them saying, "Get the F off my property," and "Can't you read the signs?" They bark back at me saying, "This ain't your land, we can use it." And "If you don't leave us alone, we're gonna call the cops on you." At this point, I am irate and I seriously thought about shooting my gun into the air to warn them and to get them off my property, but being the nice guy that I am, I just go and call the police. They don't show for another hour because they are busy taking other calls and I live in a small town. They then finally show up and I report the neighbors to them. They go over and talk with them and tell them to get off the property calmly. They refuse and all hell breaks loose. That is when they pretend to leave but come back later and trespass again and start littering everywhere on my property, shooting bottle rockets in the lake, banging loud music out of their trucks, yelling and screaming and whatnot. I then call the cops again and they don't show up. The neighbors run over all my signs with their cars, and when the police question them a second time, the neighbors claim they didn't see any signs out there. I go over to my neighbor's house and he claims he does not know anything about it, even though they were the perpetrators that caused havoc on Memorial Day and essentially rendered my lake their own habitat for the weekend. I told my neighbor to cease and desist and told him I'd be sending him a letter in the mail soon from my lawyer. He did not budge again. Finally though, I get the sheriff and he is a little keener on the issue since he had some issues with his own property and some others in town. He then comes over and we talk it out. He told me to put up a fence near the entryway of the drive, which leads out to the main road. I also told him I felt unsafe at this point. I felt like I was the bad neighbor, but it was bothering me to death that these a-holes would come and use my property, thinking that they were somehow entitled to it just because of the previous owner. I told the sheriff I signed no such thing, and the contract on the house when it was sold to me stated that the easement would end officially. Fast forward to Labor Day weekend and here I am on pins and needles waiting for my idiot neighbors to show up and have another last hurrah before the summer ends. And sure enough they did. They trailblazed through the fence I made and pulled around the lake with their camper. They even had more friends with them and had themselves a paintball fight. It was awful. I called the police again and this time the sheriff was taking the call and immediately reported it. They came over and arrested my neighbors for trespassing, destruction of property, destroying the peace and breach of contract. My lawyer talked with them and found out they ignored the cease and desist letter and that they received a letter telling them that the lake could not be used anymore after it was sold to me recently and that the easement they talked about always was not in motion. They violated so many different things on so many counts. When I sued them, I got the money back from the damage they did to my fence and ruining my deck and grass. These neighbors eventually moved away and I now have some nicer ones, but what a bunch of BS I had to go through that summer. Thankfully, I am the only one now that enjoys my lake. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, have you ever dealt with such awful neighbors before that you had to sue in the end? Let us know about any awful neighbors you dealt with in the past in the comments. And while you're at it, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we are really close to 120,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. The next one is titled Scary Coworker. It was summer 2017. I was working at a pharmacy. I'd been there for 4 years. A new staff pharmacist around my age, 28 at the time, was hired. He seemed odd, but I was nice to him because everyone else was rude to him immediately and I felt bad for him. He asked me way too many questions, some I answered and others crossed boundaries like questions about ex-boyfriends. Fast forward a month and he said that he was moving. He lived on the east side of my city and he said that he was moving to the west side where I live. He said that he actually found a house near the intersection of where I live. I asked him what street and he wouldn't tell me. He also said that the owner will live there for a few more months, so I forgot about it. Fast forward a few months later and my mom and stepdad told me they met our new neighbor. Our house is one house away from the intersecting street. This house is on the intersecting street, so we are one house away, but the backyards connect. My mom said he seemed like a really nice young man. The next time I worked with him, I asked if that was him and he said no, so I let it go for a little bit. Then another time he started asking me questions describing my backyard and asking if my street name started with the letter that it did. So he admitted it was him. I asked him how he knew it was my house and he said he saw me in the backyard. He decided not to say anything to me. The next few months were weird. I was still friendly with him as a coworker, but he clearly crossed some boundaries. He knew my birthday was coming up. My birthday and address are in the pharmacy database, and my brother was asking for ideas for what to get me. I wanted a certain phone case, so I was browsing on my phone to send my brother links to the ones I wanted. He would always look over my shoulder when I was on my phone. He saw the type of phone case and he got me the phone case and a $150 preloaded Visa gift card. I told him in a very professional manner that I felt the gift was inappropriate and probably against company policy. I walked over to his mailbox while he was at work to return it, and he kept putting it back in my mailbox with messages of begging me to accept it because I make him so happy. I ended up giving it away. Not much longer after that, I took my coworker, not him, a female, to the zoo. I had some of it on my Snapchat story. He kept messaging me on Snapchat asking questions about it, and it was bothering me, so then I blocked him. After that, he called my mom. He got her number from when they first met and told her that he needed to talk to her. He told her that he needed to come over and talk to me, so she invited him and they talked. I was very alarmed by this, but she thought it was endearing. I told him once again at work that he crossed boundaries, and he said that he does everything that he does because he cares about me. He did not understand where I was coming from at all. Those were the most standout things he has done. Also a lot of pestering about, tell me who your boyfriend is, and trying to look at pictures in my phone to figure it out, going through coworkers' phones and reading their conversations with me, even impersonating them while I was not at work to get info. One time he even cornered me at work and wouldn't let me leave until I told him what characteristics I look for in a guy. He was also mad at me when I got a birth control prescription filled, even though it was being used to correct hormonal problems from another birth control. I started being mean to him at work because I couldn't take it anymore, and he then told me that I was treating him that way because he is a nice guy who cares about me and that I am looking for a jerk. Insert alarm bells here. It became a very hostile work environment and I left about 2 months ago. This is a side note, other coworkers and neighbors hate him because he likes to start confrontations. He also plays the he said she said with people for entertainment. The neighbors have called the cops on him and think that he is crazy. I have not heard from him at all since leaving, but I saw my former coworker last week at a get-together and she said that he's trying to get her to tell him where I work now. He told her that he sees me getting into my car every morning, so he knows that I have a job. I told my mom this and she didn't take it seriously. She never believed I was in danger. I would just like to get an outside perspective. And by the way, when I come home late, I run to the door, and if no one is home, I will wait to take a shower. I'm still scared. And before we read the update, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, what do you think about this story? What would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Honestly, I am absolutely terrified that the police apparently cannot do anything in this situation, but it's something I've heard previously in other situations too. For the most part, it seems like if you have a creepy stalker or something, the police usually never do much. Absolutely terrifying situation. Either way, the update reads like this. Hey everyone, here's an update from a post I made a few years ago about a scary neighbor. Last night I looked out the window and there were multiple police cars and an ambulance. I found out later that my neighbor married a young girl from the same country as him. She doesn't speak much English and doesn't have family here. She has been here a few months. He has seldom let her leave the house, even to go into the backyard. My other neighbors managed to catch her outdoors once or twice and managed to get her phone number. She said he has cameras all over the house and outside. Last night he was beating on her and accusing her of cheating and the cops were called. After that he shut off her phone service. Last night he attacked her with a knife and my neighbors heard her screaming and they called the cops for her. She says that he was trying to kill her. She was taken away by an ambulance and he was arrested. Multiple guns and knives were found in the house. I'm gonna cut this post short because I'm typing this on a tablet with no keyboard and it's getting cumbersome. And here, Ripe Stars, there have been no further updates to this story, but it seems like that this crazy neighbor got arrested and probably went to jail or prison, and OP has no further issues with that person. Good for OP, I guess, but I feel really bad for the person that married this guy. Let's hope this guy never gets out of prison again. Anyway, the next one is a petty revenge story to lighten the mood a little bit. I was a public employee for many years. I had a middle management role for about 20 years and I reported to a department head who reported to the mayor. I had a small staff, typically 5 to 10 people who were mostly part-time. They rotated every few years and I tried my best to make their time with me valuable. I helped them pad out their resumes and paid for trainings and more. Tim was initially a decent employee, but quickly decided that he was the greatest employee of all time. His overconfidence often led to mistakes or being overextended, and he needed bailed out. He was good at basic tasks, but had a hard time with math, grammar, and interacting with adults. Part of my job was seeking federal grants for small infrastructure projects. Think adding ADA benches to nature trails and curb cuts on old sidewalks or bridges on walking paths across ditches. I could write the grants and specs and the small staff would help administer the grant. Sometimes they would do the work. Sometimes they would oversee contractors. The grants were extremely clear and included a matching component. Sometimes we would add cash or equipment time or staff time. Sometimes we would have volunteer organizations match with labor. We were doing a bridge grant and I put the employee Tim in charge. It was phase 3 of 3 and we had a lot of experience. There were 21 bridges we were replacing in batches of 7. Tim just had to keep the process going with volunteer match labor hours. The process was practically automatic. All he had to do was show up with materials and stay out of the way. He did an adequate job, barely though. I had to keep him on track to stay in spec. We are spending money to improve water quality. He wanted to improve recreation. We sent a lot of emails and texts about it. The department also used project codes to track grant spending. Each grant had a code and it was very easy to code all the time and materials through the accounting department. The volunteers signed logs each day and the process was pretty tidy. That fall, Tim continued to struggle with basic tasks and eventually demanded a promotion for his outstanding work. He did not meet the very clear requirements for a promotion, government requirements, through his own laziness despite being given opportunities to become qualified. Eventually, he became intentionally negligent and put himself and others in danger. I called him into the office after an egregious incident and offered him the opportunity to resign or be fired. Resigning means he could be eligible for rehire in a different department. Fired means he is blacklisted from the city. He refused to resign, and so I terminated him. He seemed shocked. I think he thought it was a bluff or scare tactic. He thought he was a critical cog in the machine, but he was a thorn in my side. His dad is a well-known local attorney. I had pulled Tim's state criminal record and on close inspection it was clear Daddy was bailing him out throughout life. Assault charges dropped, DUI pled to a traffic violation, possession pled to an infraction. Tim then decided to come after me. His first move was to call the federal division that oversees my grants and report fraud. They of course launched an investigation, but my records were 1000% immaculate. They called him into a meeting and his proof of fraud was that he felt that the bridges should have been a lower priority and the money would be better spent elsewhere, so the fraud was misuse of funds. However, the grant specs were followed precisely by him. He had tried to divert funds and I had stopped him. I had written evidence and the project he had accused on was the literal poster child for success and was included in a slideshow to the legislature on the success of the grant program. The feds and city powers were livid for wasting time. I had reams of perfect documentation. He was yelled out of the building. Then he filed a wrongful termination suit. He told his dad about the apparent mistreatment and his dad filed. I contacted the city attorney and dumped hundreds of pages of documentation with a summary in his email. I was in City Hall when Daddy Attorney came slinking out of the legal department, apologizing for his idiot son. I heard from a mutual friend that Daddy gave Tim a thorough reaming and withdrew the financial support that had allowed him to live on part-time work. He is doing better today, but right around that time his wife discovered his ongoing affair, the mistress got pregnant and things got rough. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I have seen a lot of nightmare neighbor stories going around and figured I would share my own. The neighborhood I live in is not the richest area. None of the people living here are poor by any means, but we certainly don't have the most luxurious houses and cars. Which is why it was strange when someone new moved in next door and parked 5 sport cars outside of his house and in his garage. I went over one afternoon to greet him and I guess the cars should have been my warning sign that he was not gonna be the friendliest person. "Delivery?" he asked as he opened his door. No, I'm your neighbor. I just wanted to come and introduce myself." I replied, extending my hand. "Delivery's in the back." He called over my head to someone in the distance and then looked at my extended hand and shut the door. I stood in a confused trance for a moment before composing myself and going back to my house. I don't usually spend much time with my neighbors anyway, and there was no obligation to become friends with him or anything, so I was not really bothered by his behavior at the time. But I probably should have seen it as a warning that there would be other bumps in the road. "Open the door," I heard at 6 a.m. one morning, accompanied by heavy knocking. "Hello?" I asked hesitantly as I partially opened my door, not removing the chain lock. "I need more space for my cars. Looking at the state of your house, I cannot imagine you will ever use all this driveway. I'm gonna have to remove this fence and park the rest here," he stated before turning around and walking away. "What? No, you cannot do that. This driveway is my property," I responded, following him out in my dressing gown. He continued to ignore me and walk away, and I just stood there looking after him, filled with confusion. There's no way he thinks that's just a normal thing to do. The next day when I woke up and was trying to head to work, I saw that one of his cars was plonked right in the middle of my driveway, blocking my car in. "Please move your car, you cannot park it on my property," I said once my neighbor opened his door, after I had stormed over and began banging on it. "What? Why would I do that? That car is probably worth 5 years of your salary. I'm not moving it." He looked genuinely flabbergasted at my request. "What kind of logic is that? I don't care how much money you wasted on it. Move it from my driveway." I was beginning to feel my temper flare at this point. "Wasted? What?" He stuttered out some garble of nonsense before slamming the door in my face. After 10 minutes I realized he was not coming to move his car and decided to call a tow company and had it towed away. "Excuse me? You cannot have my car towed," he yelled as he saw the truck pulling away with his car attached. "Why not? It was on my property," I replied with a shrug and went back inside. I was left with a sour taste in my mouth after this strange encounter. I was not sure if towing his car would be enough to make him stop. He can obviously afford the fee to have it removed from the compound, and I wouldn't be surprised if he hasn't already bribed them to never answer the phone from my number or something like that. However, what happened next was certainly the last item on my list of predictions. I heard a knock at the door one morning and opened it to see a fairly young man dressed in a suit, and he was holding a clipboard. "Hello sir, I'm the property surveyor responsible for this neighborhood and your property is due for its survey. I don't need to enter your home or anything, just walk around the perimeter and ensure everything is up to date." The man handed me some legit looking identification, so I decided to agree and let him do what he needed. I watched from the window as he walked around my property with a tape measure and noted things down on his clipboard. 20 minutes later he was finished and came up to my door again. "Well, almost everything is in check," he stated as he looked over his clipboard. "Almost?" I quizzed. "Your fence extends the perimeter of your property," the man stated, looking up from his clipboard. "What?" I asked. "Other than the house, the grounds you bought don't extend as far as your fence is extended. We will have to send someone around to move the fence to the actual perimeter of your grounds," he explained, handing me a slip of paper that confirmed everything he had just said to me. After a brief conversation about when this would all happen, with the answer being, "It has to be as soon as possible, maybe tomorrow," the man went on his way and I went back inside to carry on being puzzled about the situation. I had assumed that the fence would be moved by a few inches at most and did not really give it much thought. However, the following day when I returned home from work, I saw that said fence had been moved at least 5 meters and was now in the same position as before, only it started right in the middle of my driveway, blocking the access to my garage by being bang smack in the middle of it. This was already enough of a shock to have me slam on the brakes, but when I saw what was now in the area where the fence used to be, I nearly had a heart attack. Placed right across half of my driveway, the area that was supposedly not mine was 2 sports cars which undoubtedly belonged to my neighbor. Parking my car on the curb, I stormed over and started banging on his door. "What have you done?" I all but yelled when the door swung open. "What?" I simply looked over the property information I had bought and realized your fence extended into my grounds. "I had to call a property surveyor to check it out," he shrugged, but I could see a small glint in his eye and knew something was amiss. I turned around and stormed back to my house, resisting the urge to kick one of his cars on the way. On the paper I was given by the property surveyor was a phone number which I called up immediately. A woman answered the phone and she had absolutely no idea what I was on about, and that's when I knew I had been set up. I was relieved, to be honest, because I knew it meant there were no legit legal restrictions keeping my fence in the middle of my driveway. I called the cops and explained the situation, who said they would send officers as well as property lawyer to help me sort this out. I got all my paperwork sorted in preparation and waited for the group to arrive to help me sort this all out. After looking over my documents, the lawyer informed me of what options I had and which would be the best, and the police allowed me to start a case with them. They also informed me that they couldn't force him to pay to move the fence back and advised me to sue, which I did so. Here is how it turned out. "Your Honor, I think it's simply ridiculous that this lowlife would need all the space on his driveway." He only has one car. My neighbor called up to the judge when he realized he was quickly losing the case. The judge, not impressed, looking down her nose at him, and took a moment to decide his fate. $3,000 fine to pay for a brand new fence and remove the old one. Also 100 hours of community service so you can hopefully learn to be humble. And finally, you will be moved from your current residency. The judge stated, and just before she banged her gavel, my neighbor began screaming a long list of expletives at her. Get a warrant for a full background check and search of this man, the judge concluded, looking over towards the officers standing in the corner, and then finally banged the gavel. My neighbor went suspiciously quiet, and after the results of said background check came back, he was locked away with a 45-year sentence. It turns out he had been running a very highly organized drug cartel across the entire state, hiring minors internationally to sell said drugs. All his assets were also seized because it was overturned that he had never paid taxes since the age of 26. Safe to say, I'm pleased with the punishment he got, and I hope I never have to deal with him again. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.